Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah shir. We are holding in Mishnah Berurah Chelik Vav. We'll be learning today Im Yirtzeh Hashem Daf Mem Aleph Amid Aleph. We are continuing to learn Halachos Tainus, and we pick up today on the top line of Mem Aleph Amid Aleph with a brand new Siman. Siman Taf Kuf Samech Hey Din Tfilas Aneinu. The halachos that govern the reciting of the tefillah of aneinu. Aneinu is a tefillah that we recite in Shemoneh Esrei on a fast day. Ubai vav seifim, and here we have 6 seifim. Says the Mechaber in Sif Aleph, Yachid Omer aneinu b'shemea tefillah. An individual, when he davens his Shemoneh Esrei, he inserts the paragraph of aneinu into his bracha of Shemea tefillah. Bein yachid shekibel alav tainus. This applies to an individual who accepted upon himself his own personal individual tainus. Bein yachid hamispal im hatzibur b'tainus tzibur. Or an individual who's davening his private davening on a regular tainus tzibur, on one of the fast days, like Shiva Asar b'Tammuz, or tainus Esther, or Asar b'Tevis. So when an individual davens on a fast day, he recites the tefillah of aneinu within the bracha of Shemea tefillah. V'chein, similarly, shliach tzibur shemesader tefillasai balachash, the chazan, the shliach tzibur, when he davens his private quiet Shemoneh Esrei, kiyachid, he has the same din as an individual, kiyachid dami, ub'Shemea tefillah, and he also inserts aneinu into the bracha of Shemea tefillah. Says the Ramah, Haga, okay, we've said that you insert the paragraph of aneinu in Shemea tefillah. Exactly how do you do that? Says the Ramah, Va'imroi kaidem ki'ata Shemea, you say it before the words of ki'ata Shemea tefillas kalpeh. If I pull out a siddur over here, so we have in Shemoneh Esrei, in the bracha of Shemea tefillah, I'm reading to you from a Nusach Sfard siddur, because that's what I daven personally. I daven Nusach Sfard. So we have Avarachamon Shma Keleinu Hashem Elokeinu Chus V'Rachim Aleinu V'Kabel Barachim U'V'Rotzain Es Tfiloseinu Kikel Shemea Tfilos V'Sachanunim Ota U'Milfanecham Al Keinu Rekam Al Teshivenu Chaneinu V'Aneinu U'Shema Tfiloseinu. Now the next words are Ki'ata Shemea Tfilah. This is where the Ramah tells us, this is where we put in the words aneinu, the tefillah of aneinu. Now I looked at chakras, I have to look at mincha. Okay, here, before we say ki'ata shemea tefillas kol peh, here is where we insert the paragraph of aneinu, aneinu Hashem, aneinu b'yom tzom ta'aniseinu, and as we're going to see, a yachid, an individual, or the chazan, when he's davening the shtila Shemoneh Esrei, his private quiet Shemoneh Esrei, we don't end off the paragraph of aneinu with a bracha. We just continue ki'ata shemea tefillas kol peh, baruch atah Hashem shemea tefillah. We don't end off baruch atah Hashem ha'oineh be'es tzara. Okay, so there's the Ramah. The Ramah said v'oimrei kaidem ki'ata shemea. We insert the paragraph of aneinu before the words of ki'ata shemea tefillas kol peh in the bracha of Shma Keleinu. V'lo yachtoim ba'oineh be'es tzara. And we don't close off the paragraph of aneinu with its own unique chasima, with its own closure of a bracha, baruch atah Hashem ha'oineh be'es tzara. We don't do that. Ela kishemagia lebechol es tzara v'tzuka. When we get to the end of the tefillah of aneinu, and we say bechol es tzara v'tzuka, yesayim ki'ata shemea tefillah. Now we continue the bracha of Shemea tefillah like the regular Shemoneh Esrei. Ki'ata shemea tefillah kol pa'amcha Yisrael barachamim, baruch atah Hashem Shemea tefillah. V'lo yeshane mimatbeah habracha. So that we don't change the stamp of the bracha. The bracha was constructed by Anshe Knesses Hagdolah in a particular fashion. We don't change it. We have the opening of the bracha of Shema Keleinu, then we insert the prayer of aneinu, and then we close out the bracha of Shemea Tefillah with Ki'ata Shemea through Baruch Atah Hashem Shemea Tefillah. We don't change the structure of the bracha. So just to encapsulate what the Mechaber and the Ramah just told us, on a tainus, we have what's called the tefillas tainus. We have the prayer of a tainus, which is the paragraph of aneinu. An individual does not insert a separate bracha of aneinu in Shemoneh Esrei. An individual, when he says aneinu, he inserts it within the nusach of the bracha of Shemei tefillah. As we've mentioned already many times previously, we learned earlier in Chelik Aleph in Siman Kuf Yud Tes that an individual is always allowed to insert a personal tefillah within the bracha of Shemei tefillah. So on a fast day, an individual inserts the paragraph of aneinu within the bracha of Shemei tefillah. This applies to a regular individual. It also applies to the chazan, to the shliach tzibur. When he's davening his own personal Shemoneh Esrei, he inserts aneinu within the regular framework of the bracha of Shemei tefillah. Now let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah. Ois Katan Aleph. Omer aneinu b'Shemei tefillah. We recite the paragraph of aneinu within the bracha of Shemei tefillah. Ritzaynoi loymar, what the Mechaber wants to say over here is, she'enoi keveya bracha la'atzmai, we don't make aneinu into its own bracha in Shemoneh Esrei. We don't make a 20th bracha in Shemoneh Esrei. Let's remember, even though Shemoneh Esrei is called Shemoneh Esrei, which is 18, the original Amida, the original Shemoneh Esrei, only had 18 blessings. Later on, the sages added in the bracha of V'lamalshinam al Sikva. The Birchas Haminim was added in later for a 19th bracha, but we still refer to Shemoneh Esrei as Shemoneh Esrei. So the Mechaber is telling us here, on a fast day, we don't insert a 20th bracha of aneinu between Re'inav aneinu and Rifa'enu. We don't make a 19th bracha with its own closure of Baruch Atah Hashem aneinu beis tzara. Rather, what we do is rather, we include it within the framework of the bracha of Shemei tefillah ukidilakame bahaga, like the Ramah explained. Ois Katan Beis. This applies ben yachid hamispalel im hatzibur. This applies to an individual who's fasting his own private fast day. He was makabel tainis for a personal fast. Or a yachid who's davening his own private tefillah, his regular Shemoneh Esrei of mincha on one of the tainis tziburs, on Shivas B'Tammuz, on Asar B'Tevis. Darak l'shliach tzibur. It's only for the chazan, kavu bracha la'atzmai ben goyel l'roifei, that we established to insert a 20th bracha of aneinu between the bracha of goyel Yisrael and roifei cholei amo Yisrael. V'lo liyechidim. But not for individuals. Ois Katan Gimel, v'lo yachtaim. And all of these individuals, when they say aneinu within the bracha of Shemei tefillah, aneinu does not get its own unique signature. You don't end it off Baruch Atah Hashem aneinu beis tzara. You just continue ki ata Shemei tefillas kol peh, and you say the regular bracha Baruch Atah Hashem Shemei tefillah. V'lo yachtaim, says the Chavetz Chaim, Ois Katan Gimel, va'afilu shliach tzibur. This halacha also applies to the shliach tzibur sometimes. When is that? Va'afilu shliach tzibur, even the chazan. Im shachach loimer aneinu ben goyel l'roifei. Let's say it was a fast day, and the chazan neglected to say aneinu between the bracha of goyel Yisrael and the bracha of Rifa'enu. He forgot to say aneinu. Now what? He passed by. He already continued Shemoneh Esrei. What does he do? She'omer b'Shemei tefillah. The halacha is that now the chazan will recite aneinu in the bracha of Shemei tefillah like a yachid usually does. Gam kein lo yachtem sham bevracha b'ftei atzma. Now the chazan will not end off aneinu with Baruch Atah Hashem aneinu beis tzara. He will just insert aneinu into Shemei tefillah the same way a yachid always does. So here we have a time when even the chazan doesn't make a separate bracha out of aneinu. Normally the chazan makes a separate bracha out of aneinu and he inserts it between re'inav aneinu and rifa'enu. But if he neglected to say it then he has to say it in Shemei tefillah. Once he's saying it in Shemei tefillah, he inserts it into Shemei tefillah the same way a yachid does, and he ends off the bracha Baruch Atah Hashem Shemei tefillah. Elo yisayim ki ata Shemei ki yachid. Okay. Now we go weiter in the Ramah. We're almost at the end of the Ramah of Sif Aleph. By me, it's the last word on the line, 4 lines down in the Shulchan Aruch. Another halacha, says the Ramah. Afilu kishemisane yachid. Let's say an individual is fasting his own private fast day. He was makabel tainus to fast on a particular day. So it's not a fast for the tzibur. Nobody else is fasting. Only he's fasting. And because he's fasting, he's going to say aneinu in Shemoneh Tefillah. Let's remember, we learned that previously in the Ramah. The Ramah said a yachid could always insert aneinu in Shemoneh Tefillah. Why not? The halach of Arachaim Siman Kuf Yotes. So afilu kishemesana yachid, even when an individual is the only one saying aneinu, because it's his own personal private fast day, yoimar aneinu. He should say aneinu in lashon rabim, in the plural. Aneinu, Hashem, aneinu. Answer us, Hashem. Answer us. Not answer me. Now, why is that? It's his own private fast day. He's the only one fasting. Why is he saying this in a lashon rabim? The answer is, like the Mishnah Berurah is going to tell us, whenever a person davens, he's always supposed to join himself with the tzibur. Person is not supposed to daven only on behalf of himself. He should daven on behalf of everyone. So if he's reaching out to the Rabbeinu Shalom and he's asking the Rabbeinu Shalom, aneinu, answer me, so he shouldn't say aneini, answer me. He should say aneinu, answer us. Everybody has tefillahs. Everybody has things that they need to beseech the Rabbeinu Shalom for. So even if they're not fasting, they still have bakashas that they want the Rabbeinu Shalom to answer. So say aneinu, Hashem, aneinu. That's the first halacha the Mechaber says here, the Ramah says here. Afilu kishemesani yachid yomer aneinu. And if you look at Mishnah Berurah's Katan Dalid, you'll see what I just said. Yomer aneinu de la'olam lishtatef inish bahadei tzibura. Because a person should always join himself together with the rest of the tzibur. The truth is, we all know the famous line of Chazal. Chazal say, Kol ha-mispal ba'ad chaveroi, v'hu tzarech la'osei davar, hu nenet chila. Whenever somebody davens on behalf of somebody else, and he personally happens to need the same thing, but he sacrifices his own tefillah. Let's say a person is struggling with parnasa, but he knows he has a friend that's also struggling for parnasa. Instead of concentrating on davening for himself, that he should have parnasa, he davens for somebody else, that person should have parnasa. The Chazal say, Hu nenet chila. He'll end up being answered first. So it's always a wonderful thing to daven for somebody else. Especially nowadays, there's unfortunately so much sickness and everything going around. You know somebody who's ill, you know somebody who needs a refuah. When you daven rifeinu, have in mind to daven for somebody else. Be mispal for somebody else. You never know. You might need la'isai davar. You might need a refuah too, and you might not even know it. Hu nenet chila. You'll end up getting the refuah before he even gets the refuah. Okay, next halacha in the Ramah, right by the ois katan hay for the Mishnah Berurah, says the Ramah, not only should the yachid, the individual who's davening on his own fast day, not only should he say aneinu b'lashon rabim, but he should also say b'tzaim ta'aniseinu on our fast day. Now that's fascinating. How's he going to say b'yom tzaim ta'aniseinu in our fast day? It's his own personal fast day. He doesn't know anybody else who's fasting. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cutting hay. B'tzaim ta'aniseinu v'loy mechzik k'shikra ma'asha omer b'lashon rabim. The Chavetz Chaim says you don't have to worry that you look like a shakran. You're saying b'yom tzaim ta'aniseinu on our fast day. Who else is fasting? I don't know anybody else is fasting. Says the Chavetz Chaim, not a problem. The Magen Avraham says, in the entire world, there's got to be somebody else who's also fasting today. So you could say b'yom tzaim ta'aniseinu. You don't have to say b'yom tzaim ta'anisi. You could say b'yom tzaim ta'aniseinu and be mispal for somebody on the other end of the world who also happens to be fasting. Now this is a very interesting Magen Avraham. First, let's continue the words of the Chavetz Chaim. We'll see not everybody agrees with this Magen Avraham. V'yesh me'achrayim, there are other achrayim, shemitzadidim, who lean towards loymar saying, b'yom tzaim ta'anisi, that you shouldn't say, b'yom tzaim ta'aniseinu, in the lashon rabim, in a plural. Yutaka should say, b'yom tzaim ta'anisi, or alternately you could say, b'yom tzaim hatainus, on this day of fasting. For ha'olam nagu karama, the olam is nayag like the Ramah to say b'yom tzaim ta'aniseinu. V'chein hetik b'derech hachayim, and the derech hachayim rules that way as well. Now, it's interesting, at face value, you look at this Magen Avram, and you say, why is the Magen Avram doing this? Why is the Magen Avram, and really the Ramah, why is the Ramah pushing that we should bedafke say b'yom tzom tani say nu, when we don't know anybody else is fasting and it's your own personal fast day? Why do you just say b'yom tzom tani si? I understand aneinu. Aneinu, there's a very good reason why you should say aneinu b'loshen rabbim. Because like I said, everybody has bakashas. Everybody is beseeching the Ribbono Shel Olam for something. So what does it hurt to say aneinu Hashem aneinu? Answer us, Hashem, answer us. Answer me with my personal prayers, and answer all the other Yidden who are davening for everything that they need. There doesn't seem to be any loss in saying aneinu. So that I understand. But why is the Ramah pushing that on a private fast day you should bedafke say b'tzom tani say nu, with the excuse of the Magen Avram, because there has to be somebody else somewhere in the world who's also fasting? Laws up. Just say b'yom tzom tani si. What's wrong with saying b'yom tzom tani si? And I think the answer to that, and I think it's going to come into play later in today's shir as well, is that we're not so quick to be mishaneh from the matbei shetavu chachamim. Let's remember, this tefillah of aneinu was not written by a poet. This tefillah of aneinu was not written by just some very nice composer who knows how to crunch words, by a wordsmith. This tefillah of aneinu was composed by the kadmonim. This tefillah of aneinu was composed by big people, and by people who knew how to be mitzaref the oisiyos. We know that the Ribbono Shel Olam created the world using the aleph beis. The Ribbono Shel Olam created the world using Lashon HaKodesh. And those combinations of letters, they mean something. There's an integral meaning to the words of Lashon HaKodesh. It's like I always say, words of Lashon HaKodesh, a lion in Lashon HaKodesh is called an ari. In English, a lion is called a lion. So in Lashon HaKodesh, it's an ari, aleph resh yud. In English, it's a lion, L-I-O-N. Now, what is the word lion? The word lion doesn't have any integral meaning to it. All the word lion is, it represents an agreement between people who all decided to speak the same language, that L-I-O-N should be pronounced lion, and it should refer to that animal that's the king of the jungle with the beautiful mane. But that's all it is. All it is a haskama bein ha'umos. All it is it's an agreement that that animal is called lion. But L-I-O-N, that combination of English letters, does not speak to the nature of the beast. It doesn't integrally describe the animal. Ari, aleph resh yud, is Lashon HaKodesh. That's not just a language like English or French or Spanish. It's Lashon HaKodesh. Aleph resh yud speaks to the essence of a lion. Ari is a lion. A lion is an ari. The same thing, when we speak about a tefillah like aneinu, that was written by the greats in our history, composed by kadmonim, who knew the value and the meaning of every letter, we're very loath to change the tefillah. We don't want to change the words b'yom tzom tani seinu to b'yom tzom tani si, unless we have to. Unless we have to change it, we don't make changes. So the Magen Avram says we have a reasonable excuse not to change it. There's got to be somebody on the planet who's fasting today. So you'll say b'yom tzom tani seinu, and you don't look like a shakran when you stand and daven in front of the Ribbono Shel Olam. Okay. Now we go to Sif Beis. Says the Mechaber. Im shachach miloymar aneinu. If somebody forgot to recite aneinu in his Shemoneh Esrei on a fast day, he neglected to say aneinu. Ein machzirin oisai. You do not make him repeat Shemoneh Esrei. Not only you don't repeat Shemoneh Esrei, but let's say you finished the bracha of Shemei Tefillah and you're still within Shemoneh Esrei. You don't go back to the beginning of Shema Kileinu and say Shema Kileinu over again to say aneinu. And if you finish Shemoneh Esrei, you don't repeat Shemoneh Esrei. And the reason for this is we know that there's a halacha. We're always required to be mazkir, to mention me'ein ha'ma'ura in Shemoneh Esrei. When we reach a day on the calendar where we're commemorating a historical happening, or it's a Yom Tov, there's something special about that day, we have to mention me'ein ha'ma'ura. We have to mention what's special about that day in our tefillah. So on Rosh Chodesh, we say Yalav Yavai. On Yom Tov, we say Yalav Yavai. But that we only go back, or we only repeat Shemoneh Esrei for things that are based on a daraisa. Rosh Chodesh is a din min HaTorah. Rosh Chodesh is midaraisa. We brought special karbanos in the Beis Hamikdash on Rosh Chodesh. So Rosh Chodesh is a Yom Tov midaraisa. Pesach is midaraisa. Sukkot is midaraisa. So if you forget Yalav Yavai, you have to go back. But a tainus is not midaraisa. A tainus is midarabanan. And since it's a din darabanan, we don't go back because we forgot to say aneinu. So im shachach bilamer aneinu ein machzirin oisai. And the Ramah puts in here, V'ayin la'el siman reish tzadik dalid sif dalid v'hei. Let's jump into the Mishnah Berurah for a moment here. Mishnah Berurah is cut and vav. V'ayin la'el siman reish tzadik dalid sif dalid v'hei. Desham muchach b'sif dalid. Over there in siman reish tzadik dalid and sif dalid, it is very clear. The tekef kishe yisayim bercha Shemoneh tefillah. Once you finished the bracha of Shemoneh tefillah, you said Baruch atah Hashem Shemoneh tefillah. Ein loy lachzar. That's it. You don't go back for aneinu anymore. Even though you didn't start the next bracha of Shemoneh Esrei yet. You didn't say ritzeh yet. It doesn't matter. You finished Shemoneh tefillah, too late. No going back anymore. The only thing that you could do is, when you say, Amavarech Esamu Yisrael Bashalom, and now you go into the tefillah of a Elokai Nitzar, you could insert aneinu into a Elokai Nitzar. V'gam hasif hei desham shaykh lekan. And the Mishnah Berurah says, what's written in Siman Reish Tzadik Daled in Sif Hei also applies over here. What is written over there in Reish Tzadik Daled Sif Hei? An interesting halacha. Over there in Siman Reish Tzadik Daled, we are told that any time you miss something in Shemoneh Esrei, like over here where you missed aneinu, where we say the halacha is ein machzirin oisai, that you don't go back and you don't repeat Shemoneh Esrei, the halacha is, if you want to, on a voluntary basis, if you want to daven Shemoneh Esrei over again, and you want to say aneinu in your second Shemoneh Esrei, harishus biyadai, you're allowed to. So if you want to daven what's called a tefillas nedava, you want to daven a donation, you want to daven a voluntary Shemoneh Esrei, a voluntary second Shemoneh Esrei, and in that voluntary Shemoneh Esrei, you want to correct your mistake, and you want to say aneinu, harishus biyadai, you have permission to do so. That's what it says in Reish Tzadik Daled Sif Hei. However, if you look in the Mishnah Berurah there, the Chavetz Chaim is very careful to say, not so fast. That's only by somebody who always davens bekavana. So if he's going to daven a tefillas nedava, his tefillas nedava is going to be a bona fide davening, where he knows that if he davens a second voluntary Shemoneh Esrei, it's going to be a Shemoneh Esrei replete with kavana. So it's going to be a real tefillah. But if you're somebody, unfortunately, who very often daydreams in the middle of Shemoneh Esrei, so what? You're going to go daven a tefillas nedava now? A lot of those brachas in your tefillas nedava may chas v'chalila be a bracha of atala. If your mind is in the clouds, if your head is in the office, if your head is on work, and you're davening Shemoneh Esrei and you have no kavanah whatsoever, especially if you're davening a voluntary Shemoneh Esrei, not talking about you're davening shachris, you're obligated, you have a chiyuv to daven shachris. But over here, this tefillas nedava, you don't have a chiyuv. The halach is ein machzirin oisai. So you're voluntarily getting up and davening another Shemoneh Esrei. You can only do that if you're 100% sure you can have kavanah. If you're not certain of that, you have no right to go ahead and undertake to daven a tefillas nedava. Okay. So the Mechaber said over here, Im shachach meloimer aneinu ein machzirin oisai. You don't go back if you missed aneinu. Now continues the Mechaber in Siv Beis. V'im nizkar koidem sha'akar raglov. Let's say this fellow forgot to say aneinu, and he remembers at the end of his Shemoneh Esrei, before he stepped out of Shemoneh Esrei, Omer b'loy chasima la'achar tefillasai. He now should say aneinu within a lekai nitzar, or even if he finished a lekai nitzar already, he's up to Isa Shalom, but he didn't take 3 steps back yet, so he didn't step out of Shemoneh Esrei. He could say aneinu now, but he says aneinu without a chasima. You don't say Baruch Atah Hashem Ha'oine Beis Tzara. You just end off to Beis Tzara V'Tzukah. You thank Hashem for answering us Beis Tzara V'Tzukah, but you don't close it off with a bracha. Says the Mishnah Berurah Ois Katan Zayin, La'achar Tefillah, you say it after davening, Koidem Yihul Ratzain, before you recite the verse Yihul Ratzain Im Reifi, V'hegen Libi Lefanecha Hashem Tzuri V'Goyali. Okay, Siv Gimel, says the Mechaber. Yesh Oimrim, there are those that say, She'ein HaYachid Oimer aneinu, that an individual does not recite aneinu ki im b'mincha, only by Shemoneh Esrei by mincha, not by Ma'ariv, not by Shachris. So not by Ma'ariv the night before. Let's remember, we've said many times already, that technically speaking, every tainus begins the night before, even though you're allowed to eat and drink at night, with the exception of Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur, but all the other fast days you're allowed to eat at night. But technically, the fast begins with the beginning of the day, and the halachic day always starts the night before. The Mechaber is telling me here, an individual, Yesh Oimrim, that an individual only says aneinu by mincha. He doesn't say it by Ma'ariv the night before, he doesn't say it by Shachris the morning of the fast, and he doesn't say it at the end of the fast by Ma'ariv, because the fast is already over. But not by Ma'ariv the night before, not by Shachris, only by mincha. Why is this? Explains the Mechaber. Shema yechzenu bolmus v'nimtza shakrin b'tfilasai. What we're afraid of is that a person who's not eating, he might be seized by this sickness that the Chazal call bolmus. Now, from the description of bolmus sounds to me like a hypoglycemia attack. A hypoglycemia attack is a sudden drop and an extreme drop in blood sugar. And if anybody ever experienced a hypoglycemia attack, I personally have, when you experience a hypoglycemia attack, you fall apart. What happens is you get, it's a strange dichotomy. You become very weak. Your vision goes blurry, which is one of the key symptoms that the Rishonim mention, that your vision gets dark, your vision gets blurry, you get very, very weak, you get very, very shaky, you feel like you're going to pass out. At the same time, you get an adrenaline rush because the body, you must eat. And you get almost like a panic attack at the same time. So you get extremely hot and extremely sweaty, and you must eat. If somebody's having a blood sugar attack like that and he doesn't eat, he could chas v'chalila, he could get extremely, extremely ill, dangerously ill. So what the Mechaber is saying over here is, what should we do? We should allow a person to say aneinu by Ma'ariv. We should allow him to say aneinu by Shachris. What is he going to say in aneinu? He's going to say b'yom tzayim taniseinu. He's going to say, answer me Hashem on our fast day. But then what happens if he gets one of these attacks and now he has to eat? Now if he's going to eat, it's no longer a fast day. Now it turns out that when he said aneinu and when he said b'yom tzayim taniseinu, he was a shakran. He said it's a fast day, but it's not a fast day. He's not fasting. So for that reason, says the Mechaber, Yesh Oimrim, there are those that say, and this is brought by the Torah in the name of the Goinim, She'ein HaYachid Omer aneinu, that an individual does not say aneinu, ki im b'mincha, only by mincha, Shema yechzenu bolmus, because we're concerned maybe he'll have such an attack, v'nimtza shakrin b'tfilasai, and then he will appear to be a shakrin, a liar, when he davened and he said b'yom tzayim taniseinu. Says the Mishnah Berurah Katan Ches, Shema yechzenu bolmus, she'yeh tzarech lechol, and now because of this attack, he'll be forced to eat, kedei lahashiv nafshay, in order to restore his health. V'ayin b'taz shekosav, take a look at the Taz, where the Taz writes, Dem roitzel hispal b'shachris aneinu, the Taz says, if somebody wants to say aneinu in his Shachris Shemoneh Esrei, or ledalig tevois b'yom tanisenu, and leave out the words b'yom tanisenu, so that he doesn't have this concern, harishus b'yadai, the Taz says you're allowed to do that. Because then we don't have to worry that he's going to look like a shakran. So here we have the first halacha of Siv Gimel, that a yachid, an individual, only says aneinu by mincha according to this Yesh Omrim, because of the concern of Shema Yechzenu Bolmus v'nimsa shakrim b'tfilasei. Continues the Mechaber. Aval, however, shliach tzibur, the chazan, who is a shliach of the tzibur. Let's remember that when the chazan davens his chazaras hashatz, the loud Shemoneh Esrei, he's not davening his personal tefillah. He is a shliach, he's a messenger of the tzibur. The Shemoneh Esrei that he davens out loud by the amud is not his personal tefillah. He's davening on behalf of the tzibur. Therefore, says the Mechaber, Aval shliach tzibur, but the chazan, Oimroi, he could say aneinu gam b'tefillah shachris. He could say it by shachris as well. Kishuhu mispal b'kol ram, when he's davening the loud Shemoneh Esrei, not when he's davening his own personal quiet Shemoneh Esrei at the Amud. You can see that in the Bir Halacha here in Berurah Maschil Kishuhu mispal b'kol ram. Aval b'tfilas lachas sheloi, when the chazan davens his own private quiet Shemoneh Esrei, lo yomer aneinu b'shemei tefillah. He should not recite aneinu in shemei tefillah by shachris, because when he davens that Shemoneh Esrei, he's like any other yachid. That's his private Shemoneh Esrei. A private individual, a yachid, does not say aneinu by shachris. So the chazan who's davening shachris for the oven on the tainis, he could say aneinu in the chazaras hashatz, but not in his private Shemoneh Esrei. And now let's go back to the Mechaber. The Mechaber explains why does the chazan say aneinu by shachris in the chazaras hashatz, she'efshir shelo yisanu k'tzas ma'akol. Because again, why doesn't the yachid say aneinu by shachris? The yachid doesn't say aneinu by shachris out of a concern, Shema Yechzenu Bulmus, maybe he'll have an attack of Bulmus and I'll have to break his fast, and now nimtza shakrin. Now he looks like a liar. But we don't have to worry about that by the shliach tzibur. What are you afraid of? That the shliach tzibur is going to have a bulmus attack and he'll have to eat? So what? When he said b'yom tzom tanisenu in chazaras hashatz, he wasn't referring to himself. He was referring to the tzibur. What are you afraid of? Everybody in the tzibur is going to have a bulmus attack? That's highly unlikely. Somebody is going to fast, and I'm sure it's going to be more than one individual who's going to fast. Therefore, he's not going to look like a shakran when he said b'yom tzom tanisenu in the chazaras hashatz. Says the is there a Mishnah Berurah here? No Mishnah Berurah. But I would read to you the Bir Halacha Dibra Maschil She'i Efshir Shelo Yisanu K'tzas Me'akol. From this Mechaber it comes out, what the Mechaber is saying is, the Chazan could say aneinu in Shachris, in Chazaras Hashatz, because as long as somebody is fasting, he's not a Shakran. It sounds like that's true, even if only one or two people are fasting. So the Bir Halacha just wants to be careful, and he wants to point out a halacha. If you're davening for the Yamin on a tainus, and you happen to know that you do not have 10 people in your tzibur that are fasting, let's say it's Shiva Asa B'Tammuz, and you're davening in a very small minyan in an old age home, and you know that all the people that are there are infirm, and they're not fasting, you can't say aneinu in Chazaras Hashatz, because you don't have a tzibur, you don't have 10 people that are fasting. And this is the Bir Halacha says here, Ayin l'kaban b'simen tovkov samach vav siv gimel, debe'inon dafka asara misanim. In order to say aneinu in Chazaras Hashatz, you need a tzibur that's fasting. You need 10 people that are fasting. Ela dekan ma'iri sheyesh asara shadaitam lehisanos. Over here, the Mechaber is talking about where it's a regular tzibur. We know that there's at least 10 people here who intend to fast. We just have a concern that somebody might get struck with an attack of bulmus. In such a case, we say, since certainly there are going to be people that are fasting, he won't look like a liar if it turns out that people didn't fast. But if you're davening in a tzibur where you know you do not have 10 people that are going to fast a full tainus, In kain aneinu shliach shel tzibur le'inyan tefillas tainis. Then you're not a messenger of the tzibur. You're not a shliach tzibur to say aneinu, because you don't have a tzibur that's fasting. You don't have a tzibur that can say aneinu. Okay, let's go back here to the mechaber. So we had this halacha that the individual, according to the Yeshayimrim, an individual only says aneinu by mincha, not by shachris, because Shemoneh Esrei bolmus. The chazan, the shlich tzibur, he could say aneinu in chazaras hashatz even by shachris, because we're confident that there's going to be a kahal that's fasting. Now continues the mechaber, and the mechaber says, uva arbat soimos, by the four main ta'anesim that are mentioned in the pasuk, Asar b'tevish shivasa b'tamuz Tisha B'av Tzom Gedalia, gam hayochid oimroi b'chol tfiloisav. According to the mechaber, on those four tanesim, even an individual says aneinu, even by shachris. That's the sheet of the mechaber. Why? Ta'afilu yachzenu bolmus v'yoichal. Because by those four tanesim, the mechaber says, even if this person will experience a bolmus attack and he'll have to eat, still shaper lamemer aneinu. It still makes sense that he said aneinu b'yoim tzoim hatainas hazeh. Very interesting. The mechaber says, what are you afraid of? He's going to look like a shakran? He's not going to look like a shakran. Since these four tanesim are mentioned in the pasuk, the mechaber doesn't make that point. I'm saying that. These four tanesim are mentioned in the pasuk, and Gans Klal Yisrael was makabel to fast these tanesim, and that's why we don't need a Kabbalah Satanis for these Tanesim. So then, even if you personally, Chas v'Chalila, experience an attack of bolmus and you end up eating, we're not going to call you a shakran if you called today a fast day. It is a fast day. You're just not fasting. Gans Klal Yisrael is fasting. You are not fasting. But that doesn't mean you can't say B'yom Tzom Tanisenu. It is a fast day. It's even a fast day for me. It should also be Thomas. Of course it's a fast day. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to fast, but it's still a fast day. Hagal says to Ramah, however, while this is the shita of the mechaber, that even an individual says aneinu, even in shachris by the arba tanesim, v'nagu the minig is b'chalat tzaymis by all fasts, shaloi la'amroi kiyim b'mincha, that a yachid does not recite aneinu only by mincha. Milavad shliach tzibur, with the exception of the chazan sha'im shachris kishem ispal b'kol ram, who does say aneinu in the chazaras hashatz by shachris. Says the Mishnah Berurah, ois katan yud kiyim b'mincha. I don't think we did ois katan tes. Yeah, the mechaber said his opinion is that on the four main fast days, an individual could say aneinu in b'chol tefillah, in all of his Shemoneh Esreis. Says the Mishnah Berurah Katan Tes, b'chol tefillah, fa'afilu b'tefillas arvis shekayda matanis, even by Marav the night before. That's a matanis maskal min ba'erev, because like I mentioned earlier, technically the tainus begins the night before. Ois katan yud, the Ramah says our minig is an individual only says aneinu kiyim b'mincha, fa'afilu mispal mincha gedoyla yomer aneinu. The Chavetz Chaim points out, even if you daven mincha early in the day, even if you daven mincha a half hour after chatzos by mincha gedola, so you might think that maybe if you daven mincha that early in the day, there's still a concern shema yachzenu bolmus. The Chavetz Chaim says no. Even if you daven mincha early, you say aneinu. Because even if chas v'chalila you do experience a bolmus attack and you do have to eat, lo yeh shakrin b'tfilasai. You're still not a shakrin in your davening. Tal kol panim isana ad chatzos. Because once you fasted at least until chatzos, you have a right to call it a fast day. You could say b'yom tzom tani seinu. Now, I want to make an interesting point. If you take a look at the language of the mechaber, the mechaber said, "Uva arba tzoymos," by the four main tanesim, gama yochid oimroi b'chol tefillah, even an individual could recite aneinu in all of his Shemoneh Esreis. Ta'afilu yachzenu bolmus v'yochal, because even if chas v'chalila he will experience a bolmus attack and he'll have to eat, shayich shaper lememar, it makes sense for him to say, and look at the words very carefully, aneinu b'yoim tzoim hatainis hazeh. Answer us on this fast day. He changed the words of aneinu. He doesn't say that it's shaykh shaper lememar aneinu b'yom tzoim tanisenu. That's the regular nusach. That's the regular text of aneinu. The Mechaber changed it. The Mechaber said, even though this person is not fasting, shai shaper lemeimar aneinu b'yom tzoim hatainis hazeh. So the Aruch HaShulchan puzzles over this. And the Aruch HaShulchan wonders. He says he's not sure what the kavanah of the Mechaber was. Does the Mechaber mean that on the four main Tanesim, an individual should say aneinu by Shachris, but he should change the nusach? He should amend the nusach by Shachris, and instead of saying b'yom tzoim tanisenu, instead of saying on our fast day, he should amend it, and he should say b'yom tzoim hatainis hazeh, on this fast day. If he says b'yom tzoim tanisenu, and then it turns out that he had to eat, maybe there's a problem of merzi keshakrin. But if he says b'yom tzoim hatainis hazeh, on this fast day, then he doesn't look like a shakrin even if he has to eat. Because what do you mean? It is a fast day. Shiva Asar B'Tammuz is a fast day, whether I eat or I don't eat. So the Aruch HaShulchan wonders that maybe the Mechaber was being very specific over here. And when the Mechaber says that in his opinion, a Yachid should say aneinu on the four main Tanesim even by Shachris, it's only with this emendation. It's only with this change to the text. Now, if that's true, if that was the kavanah of the Mechaber, then, and I think the Aruch HaShulchan suggests this as well, then it could be that when the Ramah disagrees with this, and the Ramah says, no, that's not our minig is that we only say aneinu by mincha, maybe the reason the Ramah disagrees with the Mechaber is because of something I mentioned to you earlier in the Magen Avram. Maybe the Ramah said, I don't want that the Yachid should say aneinu by Shachris and make an emendation to the text. We don't play around with the nusach of the Kadmonim. So no, I'm not maskim to say aneinu by Shachris and change the text to b'yom tzoim hatainis hazeh. I would rather don't say aneinu by Shachris and don't run the risk, don't make an emendation to the text, and don't say b'yom tzoim tanisenu and risk being messy keshakrin. Instead, just don't say aneinu by Shachris. Okay, I see we're going a little bit long, but I want to push further. Let's go to Sif Daled. Says the Mechaber, there's very little Mishnah, there's no Mishnah Berurah on Sif Daled. Sif Daled, Toiv loimer b'tachanunim sha'achar tefillas hamincha. It would be proper on a fast day when you recite Tachnun. Let's remember, a lot of people say Tachnun after Mincha. Toiv loimer b'tachanunim sha'achar tefillas hamincha. It would be nice to say in the prayers that you say after Mincha, la'achar l'kain tzar, after you complete Shemoneh Esrei, Riboin kol ha'olamim goli v'yadu lefanecha shebizman shebeis hamikdash kayim. I take this back. It's not referring to Tachnun. Toiv loimer b'tachanunim sha'achar tefillas hamincha. It would be proper that when you personally recite tachanunim, recite prayers like a l'kain tzar, at the end of your Shemoneh Esrei, la'achar l'kain tzar, after you complete the l'kain tzar, you should say another prayer specific for a fast day. Riboin kol ha'olamim, Master of the universe, galoi v'yadu lefanecha, it is well known and revealed to you, shebizman shebeis hamikdash kayim, that when we had a Beis Hamikdash, Adam chayte, if a person did an avera makriv carbon, he was zeicha to bring a carbon. Ve'ein makrivin mimenu elachel by v'damai. And what was the real carbon? The real carbon, the person is supposed to look at a carbon and say that the fats of the animal that are going up on the mizbeach are like my fats. The dam that's going on the mizbeach is like my dam. So too, I'm keeping a tainus. What am I sacrificing by my tainus? I'm sacrificing my fats and my dam, and that should give me a kapar. Now we go to Sif Hey. We know that on many Tanesim we recite Slichas, and a key part of Slichas is the recitation of the Shlosh Esrei Midos, the 13 attributes of mercy. Says the Mechaber in Sif Hey, Ein hayachid rashoy loymar Shlosh Esrei Midos derech tefillah ubakashas rachamim. A yachid, an individual who's davening b'yachidus, is not allowed to recite the Shlosh Esrei Midos derech tefillah ubakashas rachamim, in the style of using it as a tefillah and asking the Rabbeinu Shalom for rachmanis. You're not allowed to daven the Shlosh Esrei Midos as a yachid. Why? The davar shebekedushahem, because this is considered like kedusha, like baruchu, like kaddish. This is a davar shebekedusha which requires a minyan. Avalim bala amram der kriya ba'alma amram. But if you want to recite it just as if you're reading psukim from the Torah Kedosha, so you want to just lane the psukim with the trop, that you're allowed to do. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Yad Aleph, the davar shebekedushahem ve'ein nemar pachas me'asara. It's like kedusha, baruchu, kaddish. You don't say it with less than 10 people. Why? What's the source of this? Why do we treat the Shlosh Esrei Midos like a davar shebekedusha, like kedusha? So I think the answer is based on the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah on Yud Zayin Amud Beis, an unbelievable Gemara. The Gemara says that when Moshe Rabbeinu went up to Shemayim to be mispal for Klal Yisrael after the Cheta Egel, he asked the Rabbeinu Shalom, Hareini Naz Kveidecha, and the Rabbeinu Shalom, the Gemara says, Kavayachol, the Rabbeinu Shalom was Nisatef Betalisai, plus the Rabbeinu Shalom is Ein Leguf. The Rabbeinu Shalom doesn't have a physical body, so we don't know exactly what this means. But the Rabbeinu Shalom put on a talis like a shliach tzibur, and he davened the seder of the Shlosh Esrei Midos. Kel Melech Yoshev Yavar Shalom Panav Yikra Hashem Hashem Keler Chapayim Rav Chesed VeEmes. He showed Moshe Rabbeinu how to daven the Shlosh Esrei Midos b'tzibur, and he told Moshe Rabbeinu that you should know a rule. Whenever Klal Yisrael will daven this seder in front of me, I'll be makabel their tefillah. But you see that the Rabbeinu Shalom showed it to Moshe in the style of a shliach tzibur davening in a tzibur. So you see from there that the Shlosh Esrei Midos requires a tzibur. Ois Katan Yud Beis. So a yachid, an individual, is not allowed to daven the Shlosh Esrei Midos when he davens b'yechidus. But if he wants to say it der kriya, says the Mishnah Berurah, benigun uta'amim, if he wants to recite it with the trop and with the perfect vowelization, then you're allowed to do that even b'yechidus. I'm going to stop over here in the middle of this Mishnah Berurah because I see that I'm really running long, and the next piece of the Mishnah Berurah here requires some explanation, and we really finished the page, so we'll stop over here. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The schus of limud HaTorah should be making against Klal Yisrael. The Rabbeinu Shalom should send Yeshuas and Refuas and Parnasa. I want to wish a speedy recovery to Shlomo Zalman ben Mesha and to Yisrael Tzvi ben Ruchama Edel Roiza, B'Soich Sharchel Yisrael, also Menachem Aryeh ben Dina Yehudis, B'Soich Sharchel Yisrael. Everyone should have a Refuah Shalema B'Karv. The Rabbeinu Shalom should bring us to the Bias Girl Tzedek, B'Meherev Yameinu, Amen. Be well.